Don't do it." But the rancher did it anyway, and the whole town went crazy. Most of the residents had lived there all their lives, and their routines rarely changed. The mornings were marked by the soft crowing of roosters and the distant sound of tractors in the fields. The streets were lined with familiar faces, old wooden shops, and the occasional pickup truck rumbling along the dusty roads. Children played near the river's edge, laughing as they skipped stones across the water. Elderly men sat on the benches outside the cafe, sipping coffee and sharing the latest gossip. Life moved slowly, steadily, and comfortably, until Tom Harlan decided to shake it all up. Tom was a rancher, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-leathered skin and hands calloused from decades of work. His hair, once dark, was streaked with gray, and his eyes held a sharpness that made people take notice when he spoke. He had earned respect in Willow Creek over the years. His ranch was one of the largest in the area, and he was known for his intelligence, his dedication, and at times his stubbornness. People admired him for his work ethic, but also knew that when Tom made up his mind, it was nearly impossible to convince him otherwise. It all began on an ordinary spring morning. The sun was rising over the hills, casting a golden glow over the town, and Tom was walking along the edge of his property, inspecting the land. His ranch was vast, dotted with cattle, barns, and fields that stretched farther than the eye could see. Everything seemed peaceful, as it always did, but Tom's mind was busy, restless with an idea that had been growing for months. By mid-morning, word of Tom's plan had begun to spread. It started with a few whispers among the town's residents and quickly grew into a mix of concern and disbelief. Don't do it," people said, shaking their heads. "At the post office, Mrs. Jensen, who had lived in Willow Creek for more than 40 years, muttered to anyone who would listen, "Tom's going to ruin everything if he goes through with this." At the cafe, old Mr. Whitaker leaned across the counter and warned his friends, "I've seen him stubborn before, but this is something else." Even the younger folks, who usually admired Tom's courage and independence, felt a nervous tension building. The reason for all the worry was simple. Tom had announced that he planned to rebuild an old, abandoned dam on his property. The dam had been destroyed decades ago during a severe flood, and ever since, it had remained untouched. Nature had reclaimed it, with grass and shrubs growing where concrete and stone had once stood. Experts and longtime residents all agreed that the dam was dangerous and should be left alone. Some said it could collapse at any moment if tampered with. Others worried that any attempt to restore it would upset the river's natural flow, harming fish, crops, and homes downstream. But Tom, as always, seemed undeterred by warnings. He believed that rebuilding the dam was not only possible but necessary. The town's water supply had been slowly diminishing over the years, and Tom argued that the dam could help store water safely, especially during the dry months. He also claimed it could provide more irrigation for farmers, prevent future floods, and even create a small reservoir that could benefit the entire town. It was an ambitious plan, one that no one in Willow Creek had dared attempt for decades, and it filled the townspeople with a mix of fear, skepticism, and curiosity. Neighbors began to watch Tom's every move. From the dusty roads and nearby hills, they could see him pacing along the old dam site, sometimes stopping to study the cracked and weathered stones, other times making notes in a worn leather notebook. Children on their way to school whispered to each other, wondering what Tom could be thinking. Farmers paused their work in the fields to steal glances, shaking their heads or exchanging uneasy looks. Even the mayor, a cautious man named Harold Green, felt the weight of responsibility. He knew that if anything went wrong, the town could face disaster, and yet he also knew that Tom's determination was not something that could easily be stopped. Despite the warnings and murmurs of disapproval, Tom began preparing for the work. He started by clearing debris, marking boundaries, and surveying the land with careful precision. He spent long hours walking the edges of the old dam, measuring, observing, and planning. His movements were methodical, almost ritualistic, as though he were connecting with the history of the land and respecting the memories of what had once stood there. As the days passed, tension in the town grew. People gathered in small groups in the cafe, the general store, and along the main street discussing Tom's plan. Some were furious. "It's madness," they said. "He's going to flood the valley, ruin our crops, and risk lives." Others were intrigued. "Maybe he knows something we don't," they whispered. "Maybe he can actually make it work." The town became a mix of anxiety and fascination, a collective heartbeat that seemed to quicken every time Tom stepped onto his property. Tom, however, remained calm. He listened politely to warnings, but never allowed fear to dictate his actions. He had always believed that progress required courage, and sometimes courage meant defying the expectations of others. In his mind, the risk was worth taking if it meant creating something valuable for his family, his ranch, and his community. He remembered his father, who had built parts of the ranch by hand many years ago, telling him, "If you're afraid of trying, you'll never know what you're capable of." That lesson stayed with Tom, and it fueled his resolve to move forward, despite the chorus of don't do, it echoing through the town. Soon, the project began to take shape. Tom enlisted the help of a few trusted friends and workers, men who had known him for years and shared his belief in perseverance. They started clearing the overgrown land around the old dam, removing fallen trees, rocks, and debris. The work was hard, exhausting, and sometimes dangerous, but the team respected Tom's vision and followed his lead. Each day, the progress was small but noticeable. A fallen stone was lifted, a section of earth reinforced, a plan for drainage carefully mapped out. Meanwhile, the townspeople watched. Some continued to shake their heads, muttering warnings, while others began to feel a spark of hope. Children who had played near the river started imagining a reservoir filled with fish and ducks, a new place for summer adventures. Farmers began considering how additional water might improve their fields. Even skeptics admitted, quietly, that Tom had a method and a determination that few possessed. Despite the growing interest, there were setbacks. A sudden storm washed out part of the old path leading to the dam site, forcing Tom and his team to rebuild and reinforce it. Equipment failed at inconvenient moments, and the work was slow. But each challenge was met with patience and strategy. Tom's leadership shone through in these moments, as he guided his team with calm authority and practical solutions. He worked alongside them, never asking anyone to do something he wouldn't do himself. Mud-streaked and tired, he became the living example of his own belief that dedication, courage, and careful planning could overcome almost any obstacle. By the end of the first month, the town had grown divided. Some residents had started to secretly admire Tom's tenacity, even if they didn't fully understand his methods. Others remained convinced that disaster was imminent. Cafes buzzed with conversation, children whispered in schoolyards, and elders debated on benches. The phrase, don't do it, had become a kind of chant among the worried, while the curious and the hopeful quietly wondered. Could Tom actually succeed where others had failed? Through it all, Tom remained focused on the task at hand. He knew that the path ahead would be long and difficult, but he also knew that every great achievement required effort, patience, and a willingness to face fear. Each day, as the sun set behind the hills and the golden light faded from the valley, Tom reflected on his work, making careful notes, planning the next steps, and envisioning the dam restored to its full strength. His resolve never wavered, and slowly the town began to realize that Tom Harlan was not just stubborn. He was relentless, driven by a belief that some risks were worth taking, no matter the cost. By the time spring was in full bloom, the story of Tom's plan had spread beyond Willow Creek. Travelers passing through the town stopped to ask questions. Journalists from nearby cities began to take notice. And all the while, Tom continued his work quietly, methodically, and with unwavering focus. The town, once certain that the project was doomed, began to feel a strange mix of anxiety and excitement. Something monumental was in the making, and whether it succeeded or failed, Willow Creek would never be the same again. And so, the first chapter of Tom Harlan's daring venture came to a close, leaving the town on edge, the workers exhausted but determined, and Tom himself ready for the challenges that lay ahead. The whispers of don't do it, continued to echo through the streets, but amidst them, a growing murmur of curiosity and hope began to rise. The story was only beginning, and the quiet town of Willow Creek was about to witness something it would never forget. The news of Tom Harlan's plan had settled into the town like a stubborn cloud that refused to pass. While some people whispered, don't do it, others could not help but watch in a mix of awe and disbelief. By the time the second month rolled around, the town had begun to realize that Tom's vision for the old dam was no longer a rumor. It was happening. and the reality of what he intended was starting to take shape. Tom had spent weeks preparing, carefully measuring the land and clearing debris, but now it was time to move to the next phase, the construction itself. The old dam, once a proud stone barrier holding back the river, had long since crumbled. Grass, shrubs, and small trees now grew along its cracked remains. To most people, it looked impossible to restore. Engineers had long declared the site unsafe. Some townspeople went so far as to say that attempting to rebuild it would be sheer madness. They were convinced that any small mistake could trigger a flood that would devastate homes, farms, and even the town itself. But Tom was undeterred. He had always believed that progress required courage. "Nothing great ever comes without risk," he often said to his crew, which consisted of a small group of loyal friends and workers who had known him for years. They admired his determination but could not ignore the danger. Still, they trusted Tom's judgment, and most had worked on the ranch alongside him long enough to know that he was meticulous and careful. The project began in earnest. Tom divided the work into manageable sections. First, they had to clear the old rubble and reinforce the foundation. Fallen stones, rotted wood, and tangled roots were carefully removed. The ground was leveled, and strong supports were planned to hold the weight of the new structure. Every step was calculated, every risk considered. Tom made sure that no action was taken without a clear plan. As construction progressed, the townspeople's curiosity grew. From a distance, families watched the workers laboring under the sun. Children ran along the riverbank, trying to sneak glimpses of the activity. Farmers paused their plowing to watch, and even the mayor, Harold Green, could not help but check on the progress daily. Some residents continued to express concern, holding quiet meetings in the cafe and general store, sharing their fears about what might happen. "It's too dangerous," they said. "The river could flood. The town could be ruined." Yet others felt a spark of admiration, beginning to wonder if Tom might actually pull it off. The work was far from easy. Every day presented new challenges. The old dam site was unstable, with cracked stones and soft earth that shifted beneath their feet. Equipment sometimes failed. Wheels broke, pulleys jammed, and trucks got stuck in the muddy terrain after heavy rains. At times, the river itself seemed like an obstacle. Its flow was unpredictable, and sudden surges of water forced the crew to work quickly to protect the site from being washed away. Yet Tom's leadership never wavered. He worked alongside his crew, lifting stones, securing beams, and directing operations. He was always calm, even when setbacks threatened to slow progress. His meticulous planning and ability to solve problems on the spot kept the work moving forward. Each day, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Tom would walk the length of the dam site, making notes and planning the next steps. He rarely rested, knowing that every decision mattered. Despite the careful planning, tensions began to rise. Some workers questioned certain decisions, asking if it was truly safe to continue. Tom listened to their concerns but never allowed doubt to paralyze him. He explained his reasoning carefully, showing them why the design would hold and why each precaution mattered. Over time, even the most skeptical workers began to trust his judgment, recognizing that he had considered every possible danger. The townspeople, meanwhile, were split. Some had begun to see Tom as reckless, a man who ignored warnings and put everyone at risk. Signs appeared along the main street urging him to stop. "Think of the town," one sign read. "Don't do it." Yet others could not help but be drawn in by the drama. They talked about Tom at the cafe, in the general store, and at school, debating whether he was brave or foolish. People traveled from neighboring towns just to witness the construction, intrigued by the audacity of one man taking on a project that so many had considered impossible. As the weeks passed, Tom faced challenges that tested both his skill and his patience. Heavy rainstorms caused parts of the newly cleared site to erode, forcing the crew to rebuild sections that had already been prepared. Stones and timbers had to be repositioned, supports reinforced, and drainage systems adjusted. On more than one occasion, the river rose unexpectedly, and the team had to work late into the night to protect the construction. Yet through every obstacle, Tom remained calm and focused. He encouraged his team, reminded them of the goal, and led by example, often working longer hours than anyone else. One of the most dramatic moments came when a particularly violent storm swept through the valley. Rain fell in torrents, and the river swelled dangerously. The crew scrambled to secure equipment and prevent the river from washing away the foundation. For hours, they worked in pouring rain, exhausted and soaked, but Tom never wavered. He coordinated efforts, moving from one part of the site to another, giving orders, lifting stones, and encouraging his workers. When the storm finally passed, the damage was minimal, and the crew's spirits were lifted by the resilience of the dam and Tom's unwavering determination. Amidst all this hard work, Tom also paid close attention to the environment. He understood that the river was a living system, and he took measures to protect wildlife and preserve the natural flow of water. He created small channels for fish to pass safely and ensured that plants along the riverbank were not destroyed unnecessarily. His careful consideration won over some townspeople who had been skeptical from the start. Slowly, a sense of cautious optimism began to spread. Even with progress underway, rumors and gossip persisted. Some townspeople claimed they had seen cracks in the foundation, while others said the structure could collapse at any moment. Parents warned their children to stay away from the river, and farmers fretted over their fields. Yet as the days passed and the structure began to take shape, the mood in the town started to shift. People began to see the dam not just as a risky project, but as a potential lifeline for the community. Tom's vision extended beyond simply rebuilding the dam. He wanted it to serve as a source of pride for the town, a testament to what could be accomplished with determination and careful planning. He held informal meetings with some townspeople, explaining the benefits of the project: reliable water supply, protection from future floods, and improved irrigation for farms. While not everyone was convinced, his ability to communicate clearly and respectfully gradually softened opposition. One afternoon, as the sun warmed the valley, Tom stood atop the partially rebuilt dam, looking out over the river and his property. The stones were carefully placed, the supports solid, and the outline of the new structure beginning to take form. He could see the river flowing steadily below and imagine the reservoir that would one day fill behind it. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that months of preparation and hard work were finally starting to pay off. The workers, too, began to take pride in what they had accomplished. They had endured long days, rainstorms, and difficult terrain, but each challenge had made the team stronger. They trusted Tom not just as a leader, but as someone who cared deeply about the outcome and the safety of everyone involved. Slowly, the crew started to feel that the impossible might actually be possible. Meanwhile, the town continued to buzz with anticipation. Some residents had begun to quietly support the project, even if they had been loud in their opposition before. Children now played near the riverbank, imagining the future reservoir, while farmers discussed how the improved water supply could benefit their crops. The mayor, still cautious, started to acknowledge Tom's careful planning and skill, though he remained watchful, ready to step in if needed. Despite the progress and growing support, the project was far from complete. The dam was only a fraction of what it would become, and the work ahead would require even more determination, skill, and courage. Tom knew that challenges were inevitable, but he also knew that the foundation was solid, the plan was sound, and the team was dedicated. The town's opinion might fluctuate, but he was focused on the goal: restoring the dam, securing the water supply, and leaving a lasting legacy for Willow Creek. By the end of the second month, the partially rebuilt dam had become a symbol of ambition, risk, and perseverance. The town had been divided between fear and admiration, skepticism and hope. And in the midst of it all, Tom Harlan continued to work tirelessly, guided by his belief that some goals were worth pursuing even when the world shouted, "Don't do it." The stage was set for the next chapter. With the foundation prepared and the community watching closely, Tom was ready to take the project to the next level. The story of courage, determination, and a small town's fascination with one man's vision was far from over. The days ahead would test Tom, his crew, and the town itself, challenging them to see whether stubbornness could become triumph, and whether one man's determination could truly change the course of a community. The weeks following the start of construction brought a mixture of excitement, tension, and fatigue. The partially rebuilt dam stood as a testament to Tom Harlan's determination, but the real test was only beginning. The foundation had been laid carefully, stones positioned with precision, and supports reinforced to withstand pressure. Yet the true challenge of building a dam was not just in stacking stone and concrete, it was in mastering nature itself. Tom's days became longer and more demanding. He rose before sunrise, surveying the site with the sharp, attentive eyes of a man who understood both the land and the river. His workers followed his lead, performing physically exhausting tasks while also learning to anticipate the unpredictable temperament of the river. Every day brought new lessons: a sudden shift in the water's flow, an unexpected storm, or a small collapse of soil that had seemed stable just hours before. Tom treated each challenge as an opportunity to improve the dam's design, adjusting plans, reinforcing weak points, and teaching his crew the importance of careful observation. The townspeople watched with growing curiosity. From the main street, the cafe, and the hills surrounding the property, people gathered to observe the work. Some parents warned their children to stay away, fearful of potential disaster. Farmers discussed the risks over fences and at local markets. Yet, despite the constant chatter, many could not help but admire the relentless dedication displayed by Tom and his team. He was not just building a structure. He was proving that careful planning, courage, and persistence could overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable. One of the greatest challenges came when a spring storm caused the river to swell unexpectedly. The water rushed faster than usual, carrying debris downstream. The team worked frantically to secure materials, shore up the foundation, and prevent erosion. Mud and water soaked their boots, rain ran down their faces, and the wind threatened to blow tools and equipment into the river. Tom, however, remained steady, shouting instructions, lifting fallen beams, and moving from one part of the construction to another to ensure safety. His calmness inspired confidence among his crew, even as the storm raged around them. By the end of that day, exhaustion hung over the site, but there was also a sense of accomplishment. The foundation had held, the river had been redirected safely, and the dam had survived a test that many believed it could not. The crew celebrated quietly, not with fanfare, but with a shared pride in what they had achieved together. Tom, wet and tired, allowed himself a brief moment to admire the work. Despite the chaos, progress had been made, and the vision was beginning to take form. As construction continued, Tom faced another type of challenge, one that was just as difficult as the physical labor: the opinions of the townspeople. Even though some had started to admire his perseverance, skepticism and fear remained widespread. Cafes buzzed with conversation about the potential dangers. "It's only a matter of time before it collapses," some said. Others, curious and cautious, watched quietly, trying to see the progress for themselves. Schoolchildren whispered stories of the dam, imagining what it might look like when completed, while older residents debated whether Tom's efforts were brave or foolish. Tom did not allow these opinions to distract him. Instead, he treated them as reminders of the responsibility he carried. He understood that people were worried because they cared about their homes, families, and livelihoods. Their fear was natural, and he respected it. But he also knew that progress required action, and sometimes action came with risk. He communicated openly with his crew and occasional town visitors, explaining every precaution and every step taken to ensure safety. Slowly, some of the skeptics began to see that Tom's approach was methodical, not reckless. Amid the labor, small victories began to build morale. Sections of the dam, once just sketches on paper and rough stones on the ground, began to take shape. Workers started to see how their combined effort could transform the site into a strong, reliable structure. Each beam, stone, and support added to their confidence. Tom frequently reminded them to take pride in their work, not just in the physical achievement, but in the teamwork, problem-solving, and resilience they demonstrated every day. Even with the small victories, the work was grueling. The sun scorched their backs during the day, and nights were long and cold. The river, though calmer than during the storm, still demanded attention. Seasonal rains brought new challenges, sometimes eroding carefully placed materials or shifting the foundation slightly. Each setback required careful evaluation and adjustment. Tom never rushed decisions, knowing that patience and precision were more important than speed. He would spend hours analyzing weak points, measuring the force of water, and redesigning sections that needed reinforcement. One afternoon, a particularly tense moment occurred when a large section of the newly built wall showed signs of stress. Small cracks had appeared in the stonework, enough to make even seasoned workers pause. Fear rippled through the crew. If the wall were to collapse, the river could breach the dam, undoing weeks of work. Tom immediately took action, instructing his team to shore up the section with temporary supports while he carefully assessed the problem. For hours, they worked silently and diligently under his guidance. By evening, the cracks were stabilized, reinforcements secured, and the section strengthened to withstand the pressure of the river. The team breathed a collective sigh of relief, their trust in Tom deepened, and a sense of pride settled over them. While the physical work consumed most of Tom's time, he also understood the importance of preparing the town for the eventual success, or failure, of the project. He occasionally invited townspeople to visit the site, allowing them to see the careful planning and hard work that went into each section. Children who came to watch were shown how stones were carefully aligned and how water flow was controlled. Farmers and neighbors who were initially skeptical began to ask questions, learning how the dam would protect crops and provide water. Slowly, the whispers of don't do it, began to be balanced by expressions of cautious hope. Despite these small shifts in public opinion, tension in the town remained high. Rumors persisted about potential collapse, flooding, and disaster. Parents still warned their children to stay away. Farmers worried about losing their fields. Some elderly residents openly criticized Tom's stubbornness, convinced that no man could control the river. Yet, for every voice of doubt, there were others who quietly admired Tom's determination, recognizing that he was attempting something few had ever dared. The dynamic between the workers, the town, and Tom became a delicate balance of trust, observation, and respect. His crew worked tirelessly, often rising before sunrise and continuing long after sunset. Townspeople followed news of progress, sometimes offering encouragement, sometimes shaking their heads in worry. And Tom himself, though exhausted, remained focused, careful, and unwavering. He knew that the dam was not just a physical structure. It was a symbol of what could be accomplished with courage, planning, and persistence. Midway through this phase of construction, Tom introduced a new approach to further strengthen the dam. He had studied historical designs, consulted engineers remotely, and even experimented with new materials and techniques. The crew learned quickly, adapting to his methods and gaining confidence in their ability to build something that could truly withstand time and nature. With each passing day, the structure grew taller and stronger, and the river began to flow within carefully controlled channels, giving all who watched a sense of the dam's potential. Yet the real test was still ahead. Tom knew that storms, heavy rainfall, and seasonal changes would challenge the dam in ways that no amount of preparation could fully predict. He briefed his crew on emergency procedures, monitored weather patterns closely, and made sure the entire site was reinforced before each potential storm. Every decision was a combination of experience, observation, and careful calculation. He refused to let shortcuts jeopardize the project, understanding that one small mistake could undo months of hard work. As the work progressed, a subtle shift occurred in the town. While fear had once dominated discussions, curiosity and cautious admiration began to grow. Families brought baskets of food to workers, children waved from a safe distance, and neighbors who had doubted Tom's methods started to ask questions about his progress. The dam, once a source of anxiety, was slowly transforming into a symbol of hope. People began to imagine what Willow Creek could look like with a secure water supply, reliable irrigation, and protection from future floods. By the end of this phase, the partially rebuilt dam had become a focal point for the community. The town had begun to see Tom not just as a stubborn rancher, but as a man willing to take responsibility, face challenges, and work tirelessly for the greater good. Even skeptics could not deny the progress made and the careful, methodical way in which it had been achieved. And yet, despite all the hard work, tension, and small victories, Tom knew the most challenging part was yet to come. The dam had survived storms, heavy labor, and moments of doubt, but the final test, the filling of the reservoir, was still far ahead. That would determine whether months of effort, risk, and perseverance would result in success or catastrophe. As spring began to fade into summer, the story of the dam, the workers, and the town's divided opinion reached a crescendo of anticipation. Children played along the riverbank, families discussed the potential benefits, and farmers quietly hoped for relief from the summer heat. Townspeople whispered and debated, some fearful, some hopeful, all captivated. And through it all, Tom Harlan remained at the center, calm, determined, and unwavering in his belief that the impossible could be achieved. The stage was set for the next chapter of Willow Creek's story. The dam was no longer just a construction project. It was a symbol of courage, determination, and the delicate balance between risk and reward. And for the town, the question remained, would the dam succeed, or would it collapse under the weight of nature's challenge? The answer would come soon, and it would change Willow Creek forever. The summer sun had risen high over Willow Creek, painting the hills and fields in golden light, when Tom Harlan and his crew reached the most critical stage of the dam project. After weeks of grueling labor, careful planning, and countless adjustments, the structure had grown from a patch of stones and timber into a formidable barrier that stretched across the river. Every beam, stone, and support had been placed with precision. Every precaution had been taken to ensure the dam's stability. And yet, despite all their efforts, the moment of truth had not yet arrived. Tom knew that the ultimate test would come with nature itself. The river, long tamed by the careful channeling of water and reinforcement of the banks, would have to be trusted to flow into the new reservoir safely. Heavy rains or miscalculations could spell disaster, undoing months of work and devastating the town downstream. But Tom also knew that progress required courage. Hesitation, he believed, would achieve nothing. The dam had to be completed, and the water had to be released slowly to see whether it could hold. The construction team worked from dawn till dusk. Every stone was checked, every support tightened, every channel for water flow measured and tested. Tom moved among his crew constantly, offering encouragement, correcting minor errors, and leading by example. His calm demeanor was a source of strength for the men and women working beside him. Though exhausted, they had learned to trust his judgment and experience. Together, they reinforced the final sections, smoothed the edges, and prepared the river for the first controlled release of water. Word of the imminent test spread throughout Willow Creek like wildfire. Townspeople gathered along the hills and riverbanks, eager to witness the culmination of months of labor. Children ran ahead of their parents, pointing and whispering excitedly, while farmers paused in their fields to watch. Skeptics were present as well, standing at a safe distance, shaking their heads and muttering their doubts. The tension in the air was almost tangible. The town, once divided between fear and admiration, now seemed united in anticipation, each person holding their breath as they awaited the dam's first test. The morning of the first release arrived. The sky was clear, the sun casting warm light on the valley, and the river flowed steadily beneath the partially completed structure. Tom and his crew gathered at the site, checking each section of the dam one last time. Workers secured the gates and reinforced weak points, while Tom walked the length of the dam, inspecting stones and supports with meticulous care. His heart raced, though he did not show it. He understood the gravity of the moment, all their work, their effort, and their risk would be judged in the next few hours. Slowly, carefully, Tom gave the signal. The gates were opened just enough to allow a controlled flow of water into the reservoir. For a few tense moments, nothing happened. The water began to rise, filling the space behind the dam, and the townspeople watched in silence. Some held hands over their mouths, unable to look away, while others whispered prayers or words of encouragement. Children clutched their parents' hands, fascinated and nervous in equal measure. At first, the dam held perfectly. Water flowed steadily into the reservoir, rising gently without causing any immediate concern. A collective sigh of relief rippled through the crowd. The structure seemed strong, stable, and capable of holding back the river. Tom allowed himself a brief nod of satisfaction, though he remained vigilant, knowing that nature could be unpredictable. The crew continued to monitor the water, checking for any signs of stress, shifting, or erosion. Every hour was a test, every observation crucial. Then, unexpectedly, a surge of water came from upstream. Heavy rains in the hills had sent more water rushing down the river than anyone had anticipated. The dam shuddered slightly under the increased pressure, and for a few terrifying moments, it seemed as though the entire structure might fail. Gasps and whispers swept through the crowd. Skeptics felt their worst fears confirmed. Children clung to their parents and farmers looked on with apprehension, imagining the damage that could occur. But Tom did not panic. Years of experience, careful planning, and problem-solving allowed him to act quickly. He directed the crew to release additional gates to manage the water flow and reinforced sections that were under strain. His calm commands and quick thinking prevented disaster. Slowly, the water began to stabilize, flowing smoothly into the reservoir. The dam held, unyielding under the pressure, and a wave of astonishment and relief swept through the town. For the first time, the townspeople began to see the full extent of Tom's achievement. What had seemed impossible just months ago was now reality. The river was controlled, the reservoir filling safely, and the dam standing firm. Children cheered quietly, parents wiped away nervous sweat, and even the most skeptical farmers nodded in grudging admiration. It was a moment of triumph not just for Tom and his crew, but for the entire town. Over the following days, the dam was monitored closely. Water levels were adjusted carefully, and the reservoir continued to fill without incident. The townspeople visited the site in greater numbers, eager to witness the transformation. Some brought families, others brought cameras, and many simply stood in awe of the structure and the man who had built it. Conversations in cafes, stores, and homes shifted from worry to pride. Tom's name, once spoken with caution, was now whispered with respect and admiration. Yet the success of the dam was not just about holding water. It was about community, perseverance, and the willingness to face fear with careful preparation. Farmers saw their fields benefit from the reliable water supply. Children found safe spots along the river to play, and the town as a whole began to feel a renewed sense of security. The risk that had loomed so large for months had been managed with skill, determination, and teamwork. Tom remained humble, though. He did not boast or claim victory. Instead, he continued to monitor the dam, working alongside his crew to ensure that every section remained strong. He knew that nature could be unpredictable, and that continued vigilance was necessary. His leadership, calmness, and methodical approach had carried the project this far, and he was determined to see it through completely. The townspeople, meanwhile, were caught up in a whirlwind of excitement. Some celebrated quietly, while others organized small gatherings to discuss the achievement. Children made drawings of the dam and the river, imagining a future where Willow Creek could thrive without fear of drought or flooding. Farmers planned irrigation schedules and discussed how the improved water supply could enhance their crops. The town had transformed from a place of cautious skepticism to one of shared pride and optimism. Tom's success also had a personal impact. For years, he had felt a sense of responsibility for his land, his ranch, and his community. The dam represented more than just a construction project. It was a testament to his values, work ethic, and belief in doing what was necessary despite fear and doubt. Standing atop the completed structure, watching water flow steadily into the reservoir, he felt a rare moment of quiet satisfaction. Every sleepless night, every challenge, every setback had been worth it. As the weeks passed, the dam continued to prove its strength. Heavy rains tested the structure multiple times, and each time it held. The reservoir provided a steady water supply, preventing shortages and ensuring that farms could thrive. The town's confidence in Tom's judgment grew, and his reputation shifted from that of a stubborn rancher to a visionary leader capable of balancing risk with careful planning. Even skeptics had to acknowledge the achievement. Some still questioned whether the dam would last decades, but they could not deny the skill, effort, and courage required to build it. Children who had once been warned to stay away from the dangerous construction site now ran along the banks safely, exploring and playing near the water. Farmers and townspeople discussed improvements to their crops and land, and the overall mood in Willow Creek was one of cautious celebration. Throughout this time, Tom remained focused on the long term. He continued to inspect every part of the dam, ensuring that minor erosion or shifting stones were addressed immediately. He trained his crew to monitor water flow, maintain the structure, and report any issues. His careful attention ensured that the project's success was not temporary, but could provide lasting benefit to the town and its residents. By the end of the summer, the project was complete. The dam stood firm, the reservoir full, and Willow Creek had gained a new sense of security and pride. The town had watched one man transform fear into achievement, risk into careful planning, and uncertainty into triumph. Children, families, and farmers all marveled at what had been accomplished. What was once considered impossible had become a reality, and the story of Tom Harlan's determination spread beyond the town, inspiring those who heard it. And yet, amidst the celebration, Tom remained humble. He understood that the success was not just his own. It belonged to every worker, every supporter, and even those who had doubted him, for their caution had ensured that every step was carefully considered. The dam was a symbol not only of courage and determination, but also of the power of community, planning, and unwavering commitment to a goal. Willow Creek had changed. The river flowed safely, the reservoir provided water, and the town had learned a lesson in perseverance, vision, and the value of taking calculated risks. Tom Harlan had achieved what no one else had dared, and the town, once divided between fear and skepticism, now celebrated his courage. The story was far from over, but Part 4 marked a turning point. The dam had survived its first real test, and the town had witnessed the power of dedication and careful action. The next chapter would focus on the long-term impact, the legacy of Tom's determination, and the reflection of a community forever changed by one man's resolve to act when others hesitated. The success of the dam had changed Willow Creek in ways no one could have predicted. What had once been a small, quiet town, filled with cautious whispers of don't do it, had now become a place buzzing with pride, curiosity, and a renewed sense of hope. The river, once feared as a force of potential destruction, was now a source of life, steadily feeding the reservoir and sustaining the town's farms and households. Tom Harlan, the man whose stubborn courage had sparked both concern and admiration, was no longer just a rancher. He had become a symbol of what determination, careful planning, and perseverance could achieve. Even as the town celebrated, Tom remained grounded. He knew that true success was not just in building a dam or proving doubters wrong. It was in ensuring that the structure remained safe, functional, and beneficial for years to come. Each day, he and his crew conducted careful inspections, checking for cracks, erosion, and the steady flow of water. Every gate, every stone, every support was examined, adjusted, and maintained. Tom had learned from the past weeks that diligence and vigilance were as important as courage and skill. The townspeople, meanwhile, could hardly contain their excitement. Farmers noticed the immediate benefits of the new water supply. Crops that had struggled under the summer sun now thrived. Pastures were greener, and cattle had abundant water. Children played near the riverbanks safely, skipping stones across the calm water, building small dams of their own for fun, and marveling at the larger structure that had inspired it all. Families visited the reservoir, picnicking along its banks, and enjoying the new sense of security the dam provided. Tom's accomplishment also brought the community together in unexpected ways. People who had once opposed the project found themselves quietly acknowledging his skill and dedication. Cafes and stores became spaces for celebration, discussion, and reflection. Neighbors shared stories of Tom's tireless work, his careful planning, and the moments when nature seemed poised to test them all. Even the skeptics, once vocal and insistent, began to smile and nod in admiration, recognizing that the dam's success was not a fluke, but the result of months of planning, labor, and courage. The mayor, Harold Green, could hardly believe the transformation. What had started as a source of worry had become a landmark achievement for the town. He visited the site frequently, observing the structure, speaking with workers, and offering words of gratitude. "Tom, you've done something extraordinary here," he said one afternoon, standing at the edge of the reservoir. "This will benefit Willow Creek for generations. You've taken a risk, and it has paid off beyond what anyone could have imagined." Tom nodded, accepting the compliment with his usual humility. He understood that the real reward was not recognition, but the knowledge that his efforts had made a tangible difference. As the days passed, the dam became a central part of town life. Children learned about water flow and the importance of careful construction. School teachers brought classes to the site, explaining the engineering behind the dam and the lessons of perseverance and problem-solving. Local newspapers wrote stories highlighting Tom's determination and the way a single individual's vision could change a community. Visitors from nearby towns came to witness the structure and learn from Tom's approach. Willow Creek had become a place of inspiration, all because one man had refused to heed warnings and had acted with purpose. Tom, however, never let the attention distract him from his responsibilities. He continued to monitor the dam closely, making sure that every stone and support remained secure. He trained his crew to maintain the structure, teaching them to identify early signs of wear and to address potential issues promptly. For Tom, the project was never just about completion. It was about sustainability, responsibility, and the understanding that even the most carefully built structure required ongoing care. The impact of the dam extended beyond the immediate practical benefits. It transformed the town's mindset. People began to see that challenges, when faced with courage, preparation, and teamwork, could lead to remarkable results. The collective experience of watching the project unfold created a sense of shared pride. Villagers who had once doubted the plan now participated in discussions about how to improve irrigation, how to maintain the riverbanks, and how to ensure the safety and prosperity of the town in the future. Tom's personal life also reflected the achievement. He had spent countless hours on the dam, working through storms, long days, and exhaustion, but the success brought him a quiet satisfaction. He walked along the riverbank, observing the water flowing steadily into the reservoir, listening to the soft rush of water, and feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. For all the warnings, for all the doubts and fears, he had proven that vision, careful planning, and relentless effort could overcome obstacles. Yet he remained humble, knowing that luck, timing, and the support of his crew had been essential to success. One afternoon, a small group of children approached him along the riverbank. "Mr. Harlan," one of them asked, "how did you know you could do it?" Tom smiled, kneeling to their level. "I didn't know for sure," he said. "But I believed that if I worked carefully, thought about every problem, and never gave up, we could make it work. And we did it together. That's the most important part. You can't do something this big alone." The children nodded, inspired not just by the structure but by the lesson in courage and teamwork. The townspeople also began to recognize that Tom's success had a lasting impact on Willow Creek's identity. The town, once hesitant and cautious, had learned to value calculated risk, thoughtful planning, and persistence. Farmers and residents discussed new ideas for improving the land and the community. The sense of possibility that Tom's dam had created began to extend beyond the riverbanks, influencing education, local business, and social projects. The lesson was clear. Progress required courage, preparation, and a willingness to act when others hesitated. Even as the town celebrated, Tom remained vigilant. He conducted regular inspections, ensuring the reservoir's level remained safe, and trained his crew to monitor the dam for potential wear. Every precaution, every small adjustment, and every maintenance check was part of the ongoing effort to ensure the project's longevity. His attention to detail became a model for others, showing that true success was not just in completing a task, but in sustaining it responsibly. With the dam functioning perfectly and the town thriving, a sense of closure settled over Willow Creek. The story of don't do it, had transformed into one of triumph. What had begun as a warning against risk had become a lesson in courage, preparation, and community. Children grew up hearing stories of the man who defied doubt and built a dam that secured the town's future. Farmers spoke proudly of the reliable water supply. Residents, once divided in opinion, now shared a collective pride in what had been accomplished. Tom himself knew that the legacy of the dam extended beyond the physical structure. It was about courage, vision, and responsibility. It was about understanding that while fear and doubt were natural, careful planning and persistence could transform risk into opportunity. He had proven that one person's determination, combined with teamwork and careful attention, could create lasting positive change. The weeks and months that followed cemented the dam's success. Seasonal rains tested the structure further, and each time it held firm. Water flowed steadily into the reservoir, supporting farms, livestock, and households throughout the town. The community thrived, and the story of the dam became part of Willow Creek's identity. People who had once whispered warnings now shared stories of inspiration, passing down lessons about courage, careful planning, and perseverance to future generations. Even years later, the impact of Tom's decision continued to resonate. The dam remained strong, the river flowed safely, and Willow Creek continued to prosper. Visitors came from neighboring towns to see the structure, to learn from Tom's experience, and to witness the results of determination, teamwork, and careful effort. The town had been changed forever, not just physically but culturally, as residents embraced the lessons learned from a man who had dared to act when others hesitated. Tom Harlan remained humble, living on his ranch and continuing his work with the same dedication and care that had guided the dam's construction. He did not seek recognition or fame. His satisfaction came from knowing that his work had made a lasting difference for his town, his neighbors, and the generations to come. The dam stood as a symbol of what could be achieved when courage was combined with skill, preparation, and persistence. And so, the story of Willow Creek and its remarkable dam reached its conclusion. The town, once quiet and cautious, had witnessed the transformation that occurs when one person refuses to yield to fear. The words don't do it had echoed through the streets, but Tom Harlan's determination had shown that calculated risk, careful planning, and relentless effort could achieve what many thought impossible. The river flowed safely, the community thrived, and the lesson of courage and perseverance became an enduring part of Willow Creek's identity. The legacy of Tom Harlan and his dam would be remembered for generations. Children would grow up hearing the story, learning that true courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act thoughtfully in the face of it. Farmers would continue to benefit from the reliable water supply. Residents would reflect on the power of careful planning, teamwork, and dedication. And Tom, quietly observing the river, the reservoir, and the thriving town, would know that his decision to act, despite the warnings, had changed the course of Willow Creek forever.